going, everybody? Welcome to the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown. It is Thursday, September the 11th. Let me adjust my graphic here to make everything factually correct. But as you might imagine, for many people in this country, it's a big day. It's a day of remembrance, and this is why we're red, white, and blue on the lights behind me today. Welcome into the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown. Again, you're watching Rock One. And, like I said, like I started with, today is an important day in this country. 24 years to the day since the terrorist attacks happened on the World Trade Center at the Pentagon in Pennsylvania. Over 3,000 people died. And the thing that I think about today is, like many of you out there who are listening today, you lived it. You were there when it happened. I remember I spent the entire day just watching the news, as many people who were around and, were old enough to remember September 11th, 2001. The thing that always kind of jars me a little bit, is that there are so many, even adults at this point, who now look at September 11th as like just another page in a history book. My daughter's in college now, and there have been multiple times where I've had to explain to her what it was like that day, what the country went through, the changes since then. And for her, it's not too dissimilar than the Revolutionary War or the Civil War or, the signing of the Magna Carta, all these things that, when I was growing up were distant historical memories. And the reason I bring all that up is to say that while for many people, some of you who are listening and watching today, this is just a note in the history books. Like I said, there are 3,000 families out there that for them, this is the day that they lost a loved one, maybe more than one loved one. So September 11th for them isn't just a history test answer. It's, a day that their lives changed. And so on this day, I want to start today by saying, let's remember them. Let's take a moment for them to appreciate all they went through. In many cases, the sacrifices that were intentionally made on September 11, 2001 to help others, to give others the opportunity to continue on after that day. This is not just a date in history. This is, for many people, a life-changing event. So again, I just want to say, let's all at some point today take a moment, say a prayer, however you want to remember it, and honor the fact that this day is not just when terrorism hit in America for the first time. This is when lives were altered, people were lost, and things were changed for so many Americans in this country. All right, this is a show about sports, so we're going to talk about sports today, as we always do. And as we very often do, we will begin with the Bills. And there is actually some breaking news going on right now. Ed Oliver today was not at practice. He got a DNP for a walkthrough, which is saying something. The Bills, separate discussion, by the way. Yesterday, the Bills talked all about how Sean McDermott wanted this week to be a hard week. Ed Oliver even said when he was talking to the media that full pads after a game where, the team played hard for 60 minutes is a little unusual. Well, they followed that day up with a walkthrough today, which tells you how hard yesterday probably was. Either way, though, the big news today is that Ed Oliver is nursing an ankle injury and, again, did not practice today. Further, as you can see there on the graphic, he was seen in a walking boot and using his scooter in the locker room afterward. This is a big-time concern for the Buffalo Bills. Now, what does a scooter and a walking boot mean? Well, look, it's always dangerous to play, radio talk show doctor. But when Khalil Shakir suffered his high ankle sprain during the blue and white scrimmage back on August the 1st, the next practice at St. John Fisher, walking boot and scooter was the way he was getting around, a couple days after that injury happened. So this doesn't mean that Ed Oliver has a high ankle sprain, but I think a walking boot and a scooter does indicate a high level of seriousness for this injury. This is not something that I would not think, even if this was precautionary, even if the Bills were using as much caution as possible. If a guy's got a scooter to get around, there's something that's seriously a problem there. That is, I think, at least possible to impact whether Ed Oliver plays coming up this weekend. And let's start with this. I don't know when the heck this happened. We'll probably find out from Sean McDermott when he talks to the media tomorrow. But Ed Oliver yesterday, the video you just saw was him at practice yesterday. He looked 100% fine. Again, he spoke to the media afterward, did not use a scooter to get to that press conference, did not have a walking boot on for that press conference either. So whatever happened that got Ed Oliver to a walking boot and a scooter happened after he left the facility yesterday, or at least after he left, I shouldn't say that, after he left the press conference at the facility yesterday. Could it have been a, weightlifting injury? Something happened, when he went in the weight room yesterday? For sure. Could he have theoretically gotten hurt somehow during the walkthrough today? I guess that's possible. Someone leaves a bottle on the ground and you step on it wrong. Sure. I would think the most likely scenario is that somehow this happened maybe away from the facility. Maybe not most likely, but certainly on the table is that Ed Oliver got hurt on his way home or at home. He talked yesterday about how, kids are changing his life and making him more mature. Wouldn't be the first dad to get tripped up by a kid and have something happen. I don't think that's the likely scenario, but it's not impossible. So it's unfortunate that somehow Ed Oliver has an injury that requires a walking boot and a scooter that did not involve a game or a practice that was anything more than a walkthrough. Now, training room injuries happen all the time, so that could very likely be the answer. Again, we won't find out more details about it until tomorrow, but this could be a big-time concern. Let's play out the scenario that it's a high ankle sprain, which again is what Khalil Shakir had when he had the walking boot and scooter treatment, back in preseason. Those things can linger. There have been multiple seasons where we get to the end of the year and you're talking to Sean McDermott or a player or Brandon Beane in a press conference after the season, and the question will be about why did player X not quite look as good? And the high ankle sprain very often gets blamed, even if that high ankle sprain happened September, October, weeks ago. It's the kind of thing that's hard to fight through once you get into the season. Khalil Shakir might have been fortunate to have his high ankle sprain happen the first day of August because you have 2, 3, 4 weeks where you don't have to do anything, especially if you're a veteran like Shakir. You don't have that now. There's going to be a rush to get Ed Oliver back if that's the type of injury he has. So to me, right off the bat, the high ankle sprain is probably the number one concern. There's no cast or anything. He's not on crutches, so it's unlikely to be a break or a tear or anything to that level, you would think. I think the high ankle sprain is the worst likely possible scenario with this. And it could be any number of things in between. It could be a minor sprain. It could be some sort of turf toe injury, I guess, theoretically. Again, I'm getting into dangerous waters here trying to play Twitter doctor. Regardless, if the guy is on a scooter 3 days before the game, I think it's more likely than not he doesn't play on Sunday. Not impossible. We'll find out again more from Sean McDermott on Friday, but this is a big concern. So let's say Ed Oliver is not available for any length of time. Say it's Sunday. The Bills are already light at the 3 technique, the defensive tackle that he plays. They got TJ Sanders, the rookie. He's fine. But Larry Ogunjobi would be another option. He's suspended. Dwayne Carter would be another option. He's on injured reserve, out for the season. The Bills don't really have anyone else on the active roster who can immediately replace what Ed Oliver does. So you look to the practice squad. Now, they've got a number of practice squad defensive tackles. The one that stands out to me right off the bat, Big Phil, baby, Jordan Phillips might get an opportunity on Sunday if Ed Oliver can't go. Because what else the Bills have on their practice squad are guys, the one guy they just signed literally yesterday, I don't remember his name. I'll call up the Bills roster here quick. But the 2 other options they have in the practice squad are not guys that I would want to run out there for game 1. So here's the name. Fedarian Mathis. He's a former second-round pick right away. Oh, by the way. They do have Zion Logue on the practice squad, but he's more of a one-tech. He's more of doing, the Daquan Jones job. I don't know much about Mathis other than, again, he is a former second-round pick in his 4th year. A guy who, available in year 4 in week 2 as a former second-round pick, not someone who worked out as the draft pick would have hoped. Bottom line is, not only does Ed Oliver, we haven't gotten to the part of what happens to the Bills because they lose the talent that is Ed Oliver. There's already going to be a problem simply by filling the position that he plays. I know Jordan Phillips, when he came into the season, talked about how he was a guy who still thought he had football left to play. Remember, we talked about Phillips and Jordan Poyer when they were signed in the preseason as guys who are probably going to be more likely to help out as coaches. So I don't know how much the Bills anticipated needing either one of them. But now all of a sudden, Jordan Phillips looks like a viable option if Ed Oliver can't play. And Phillips, I think more so than Poyer, when he joined the Bills, there was more of an intention to play. You know, he made it clear that I still feel like I have football left in me. I still feel like I can contribute. And again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago as well. When it comes to those older guys, it's easier for Jordan Phillips to get away with playing at an older age than Jordan Poyer because Jordan Phillips has to cover 4 yards of ground. A guy like Poyer's got to cover 40. And the older you get, the more any lack of athleticism is going to hurt because of simply the amount of ground you have to cover. Jordan Phillips can just be big and unmovable and be effective. So I don't know where the Bills go if Ed Oliver's not available, just in terms of what body they put into that spot. I think Jordan Phillips is the most likely scenario. You know, normally they have a number of guys that you can move around. They can play different positions. They don't really have that this year at defensive tackle, at least with the guys they currently have. Michael Hoyt is a guy that you can bounce around. He did actually come up in college as a defensive tackle. He's not really built for that anymore, but theoretically you could put him there. Either way, that this creates a hole. Before we get into the talent thing, let's talk about that now. You guys all watched the game against the Ravens on Sunday night. Ed Oliver was the best tackle the Bills had out there. I mean, he was, 80, 90% of the good things the defensive line did. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen every single game. Daquan Jones, by the way, who was not very good most of that game, got run over in the run game along with most of the rest of his teammates for 3+ quarters. Daquan Jones stepped up late and made plays and was a big part of the reason the Bills got the Ravens off the field 3 times late in that game. So it's not like these guys cannot make plays at all or were totally irrelevant against the Ravens. But if the defensive line made 10 plays in total, Ed Oliver had 8 of them. Greg Rousseau had some push for some pass rush on the outside. Joey Bosa had a little bit of push. Wasn't bad. Obviously forced the fumble. There are plays that can be made. But, man, you take Ed Oliver out there, and you're losing a lot, primarily with the pass rush. Look, in the run game, even with Ed Oliver out there, the Bills gave up 200+ yards. So it wasn't like Ed Oliver was totally changing or making the Bills' run defense, really good by himself. I mean, how much worse can it be if Ed Oliver doesn't play, right? It's the pass rush situation that I think concerns or should concern the Bills the most because he was bringing the juice from the inside. He was a problem. And Josh Allen talked about it yesterday, that today in the NFL, you're more worried about that interior pass rush than you are on the outside. Simply because as a quarterback, if the outside guys get in, well, you can step up and still make a play. You can step up and escape. But if you step up and there's a guy there, that's where you get more of your problems. And Ed Oliver was that guy for a lot of the time against the Ravens on Sunday night. So without him, the Bills don't really have that guy who can get pressure on the inside. Daquan Jones used to be pretty good with it. Didn't see much of it Sunday night. I think, obviously, he's more towards the back end of his career. Probably expecting him to be effective in that spot is not fair. TJ Sanders isn't ready yet, I don't think, to be that kind of guy, even though his draft profile was that. Deion Walker looked good in preseason. It would not stun me to see Deion Walker be able to provide some pass rush. But again, in game 2, not something you should expect. It's going to make it, even more difficult for this Bills defense to have a rebound game against the Jets after what happened against Baltimore if Ed Oliver's out. So obviously a huge deal. And again, we won't know for sure anything about Ed Oliver probably until tomorrow when Sean McDermott talks to the media. But if he's on a scooter today, I think it's a big, big concern. And we'll talk about this more, by the way, tonight on BKL Nightly, 8:30 tonight. You can catch that. Be me, Caleb Carr, and Rachel Liebert. Everything. Oh, that's not it at all. And back to me. So we'll have that tonight at 8:30. We'll talk more about Ed Oliver, any updates that come out of One Bills Drive, explaining what's going on. We'll certainly hit that tonight right here in Rochester first at 8:30 tonight. All right, now, more Bills news from today, more Bills talk. Let's go back to that run defense for a minute. Yes, they got trucked by the Ravens, and it was no bueno. It was nearly 10 yards a carry for both Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Lamar was 6 carries for 70 yards. Henry was 18 for 169. I mean, before the last few carries in the fourth quarter, they were averaging 10 yards a rush. I mean, that's like 1983 Nebraska stuff. So overall, what was the total number here? 238 for the Ravens. Is that bad? Yeah, of course it's bad. It's really bad. You know, it's the kind of thing that you cannot tolerate. But let's remember, last year the Bills gave up 271 to the Ravens in the regular season. You know how many other 200-yard rushing games the Bills allowed last year? 0. Do you know how many other 160-yard rushing games the Bills allowed last year? 0. They only had one game over 150, and that was against the Niners, a game the Bills won by 25. In total last year, they only allowed 100 yards 9 times out of 17 games, including that Baltimore game. So you throw out the Ravens, and the Bills were 50-50 allowing 100 yards in a game. So just because game 1 this year was this running disaster, well, Baltimore does that to everybody. And Baltimore definitely does it to Buffalo. It doesn't mean the run defense is good, and I have my concerns about it. Like I said, you know, Daquan Jones is your point man for stopping the run, and he was not good for most of that game. Stepped up late, but was not good most of that game. You didn't get much out of the rookies in terms of run defense, Deion Walker and TJ Sanders. Bosa was okay on the edge. A.J. Epinesa was fine as he normally is. Greg Rousseau is pretty solid. He's a good run defender. But any, I think, concerns or panic buttons that people want to push with this run defense, it's way too premature. And last year is all you got to look at to see evidence of that. Yeah, they were bad against Baltimore last year too. Again, Baltimore does that to everybody. So expecting the run defense to be bad all year, we're way ahead of that. Now, again, there are concerns about individual players. You know, you didn't see a lot from the Bills' interior defensive line. This is going to be a big game this week to prove otherwise. And it's a great test. I mean, this Jets team on Sunday is pretty much the perfect test for what the Bills, I think, would want. And some of the guys talked about it too. I think it was A.J. Epinesa who said yesterday that this is a good opportunity, you know, to see a similar type run game. Not the same, you know, that like the Ravens have guys who are going straight to Canton. I mean, you know, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to hang up the cleats and put on a gold jacket right after that. Justin Fields and Breece Hall are above average runners. They're good players, at least in the running game, but they're not that level. The Jets offensive line had a really nice debut. There are a lot of reasons to think it could be pretty good, but it's not Baltimore. And certainly the coordinator. I mean, the Ravens have Todd Monken, who's done it for a long time. The Jets have Tanner Engstrand, who's in game 2. We don't even know if he's any good. So while the Jets might be good, they probably won't be the Ravens level and probably not even close. But they still are going to be similar enough that the Bills are going to get a nice test this week. And we're going to get to find out, you know, facing this Jets run team, this Jets run game, you know, if those Bills run defense problems were just Ravens related, or if this is a concern that the Bills are going to have all year. And to be honest, it could, you know, fall in the middle. Like without Ed Oliver, you know, I wanted to see the Bills defense kind of step up in this game. I wanted to see the Bills defense not get run over. I wanted to see them really compete and cause the Jets problems. Yeah, maybe you give up 100, 115 yards, something like that. You know, the Jets are probably going to hit some runs no matter what because Hall and Field are just that good and the offensive line should be that good. But I wanted to see the defense, you know, really make it hard on the Jets run game. Now, without Ed Oliver, I don't know if I can sit here and expect that or demand that as proof that the run D is something the Bills can at least, something that won't be a weekly hole for Buffalo. The kind of thing that can take apart what's going on with your game. Regardless, making some plays against the Jets and having some sort of rebound, I think needs to be a priority. I mean, if it's 230 yards again this week, then there might be some panic buttons being pushed in Western New York, and appropriately so. Even if, now look, we might get to the end of the year and determine that the Jets run game is like number 2, 3 in the NFL. It's not out of the question. I mean, they're 4th in the league right now in a game they lost. They ran for 182. So they might be pretty good this year. They won't be the Ravens. I guarantee that. I think we need to see some sort of improvement. And I just love the test. I love how perfect it is that you get a similar style, at least with the running back and quarterback in week number 2 for the Bills. It's unfortunate that Ed Oliver, even if he's playing, it seems pretty clear he's going to be nursing something. So you won't get the Bills defense at 100% of what we saw last week. But either way, we will get some more information on where this Bills defense is, at least in the run game. I don't know about how much in the pass game. The Jets, Justin Fields looked good week 1, and Garrett Wilson's still Garrett Wilson. But this is not a pass offense like what Baltimore has or what the Bengals have or a lot of other teams the Bills are going to face this year. Either way, though, this is a heck of a test for the Bills' run defense. One thing that didn't get talked about enough, I think, coming out of that Ravens opener was the Bills' run offense. Buffalo only ran for 108 yards in this game against the Ravens. Josh Allen and James Cook combined averaged only 3 yards a carry. And James Cook is a home run hitter. You should be getting more out of your run offense than 3 yards a pop. And the run game last year, to me, I talked about this quite a bit, was one of the big reasons why I thought Josh Allen won MVP. Because the Bills were able to run the ball consistently, because they were able to take the pressure off of Josh Allen to carry the offense, I thought that made him a cleaner, more efficient, and smarter quarterback because he didn't feel the need or didn't even have the pressure to make that hero play all the time because he knew that, all right, I can throw this one away and I'll probably still hand it off and get 5 yards on the next snap anyway. If you don't have that, it makes things harder on Josh Allen. It makes things harder on the offense. You saw it Sunday night. Middle of the third quarter, it really felt like the only play the Bills had to use that would be effective would be Josh Allen being Superman. And outside of that, nothing else was really, making any sort of headway moving the ball down the field. Improving that run game, to me, might be even more of a priority than improving the run defense. Because, look, if the run defense is bad all year, you still got Josh Allen, right? You can still score 35 points and win a game. Like you don't want to, but you can. If the Bills don't run the ball, again, you still got Josh Allen. You can make the same argument. I mean, really, any problem on the Bills roster can be solved with you still have Josh Allen. Regardless, if you don't run the ball and you make things harder on Josh Allen, you probably don't get the MVP season. Remember, it was only 2 years ago Josh Allen threw 18 interceptions as the quarterback on a team with a run game that wasn't quite as effective. Now, there's no reason to think this Bills run game should be any different. It's the same offensive line, the same sixth offensive lineman with Alec Anderson. You even got a better tight end that can block in Jackson Hawes. He was fantastic in this game against Baltimore. I mean, the rookie is easily my new favorite guy to watch on film now with what he did against the Ravens Sunday night in his debut. So the personnel says you should still be able to run it pretty effective. Now, that 108 yards the Bills had in the opener, last year the Bills only had 5 games that were less in terms of total production. And none of them were the playoff games. And the Bills in the playoffs last year averaged 166 yards a game against good run defenses. Baltimore and Denver, remember last year, were the two best run defenses in the NFL, and the Bills put 360 on them in 2 games. So 108 is notable, and not necessarily because of the opponent. Now, obviously, in that game, the Bills got behind and really could not run the ball for most of the second half. That's certainly a factor. But again, the yards per carry is the alarm bell with this. You can't average 3 a carry if you're the Bills and do all the things you want to do. Are you still going to be 11, 12 wins? Is Josh Allen still going to be an MVP candidate? Sure. But if you want to be the 1 seed, if you want your quarterback playing at that MVP winning level, I think this run game needs to be a part of it. Now, how good is the Jets D this week in terms of a test? I don't know. They weren't supposed to be very good going into the season. They did trade for familiar face Harrison Phillips right before the season started. And I think it was a great move for the Jets because, I mean, they literally had nobody when it came to a run-stopping defensive tackle other than Quentin Williams, who's great at everything. Their depth at that spot was very bad. So bringing in Phillips, I think at least took a massive weakness and made it not a massive weakness, but I don't know how good it is. The Steelers only got 53 yards rushing on them last week. The Steelers' run game does not look good. I mean, when Jaylen Warren is your number 1 back, and I love Jaylen Warren, but he's not, your 20 carry, 150 yard type of guy. You're not exactly a Derrick Henry or Sean Alexander or Adrian Peterson level rushing offense. So again, and you know, everything we talk about with week one is going to feel like this, where it's, well, they did this in the first game, but who knows if it's for real. That being said, the Jets only allowed 53 yards rushing last week. So, you know, if the Bills can come out and run the ball better and they put up a $150, you know, something like that this week, I'd feel really good. But it's something that I think the Bills do need to do in this game as a reminder that they still have it in the bag. You know, especially with Ed Oliver out, I think there's going to be if Ed Oliver is out, there's going to be probably a need for the Bills to score, you know, 30 plus points again, because without Ed Oliver, you know, this defense doesn't have a ton of teeth right now, especially up front. Again, the Jets offense isn't the Ravens, but that looks like they can do some things. So I think there's some danger this week in terms of the Jets being able to, you know, put up 20, 25, 30 points. So that means the Bills offense is going to have to score. And if the Bills offense is going to have to score, to me, that means being able to run the ball, you know, better than he did last week. One more note on the Ravens game, and this is another piece of news from today. Lamar Jackson is not going to be punished for the interaction he had with the fan after the DeAndre Hopkins touchdown there in the third quarter. If you've seen the video, after DeAndre Hopkins catches the pass, he celebrates, and the pile with the Ravens offense kind of pushes all the way towards the wall where the fans are. And there was a fan there who basically slapped DeAndre Hopkins on the head as he was walking by. And then Lamar Jackson follows Hopkins, and the fan slaps Lamar Jackson on the helmet, and Lamar Jackson pushed him back. Now, look, Lamar Jackson can't be pushing fans. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I don't care what kind of offense you think a fan has initiated upon you. The player cannot respond. There's nothing good that comes from that. So Lamar Jackson was very much in the wrong, and he publicly apologized for it. But that being said, when the fan is the one who's initiating the contact and did it more than once, and you got a player who's essentially defending his guy, I think we can all understand that part of it. And I think we can understand why the NFL would not punish Lamar Jackson in any way. They did say the team has addressed it. I don't think there's been any team tangible punishment. I would imagine at some point somebody said to Lamar, hey, don't do that again, buddy. But beyond that, I don't know what more should be expected. The fan was wrong 100%. Lamar was wrong too. But hopefully both sides have kind of learned their lesson, and we'll move on here. All right, speaking of moving on, we're going to take a break. When I come back, I want to talk a little bit about Keon Coleman and where he's at coming out of this first game. Big game for Keon. Deion Dawkins had a whole lot of nice things to say about him today. We'll talk about that a little bit too. That's when the Endgame returns right after this. You are watching Rock One. We're back in just a moment. Thad Brown back with you on the Endgame. You're watching Rock One. It is Thursday, September 11th. Everyone taking their time to remember how important this day is today, I'm sure. Moving on with the Bills here. One of the big stories coming out of week number one there was Mr. Keon Coleman, who many people thought there was a breakout coming, and it certainly looks like through week one that might be the case. 8 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown, a deflected touchdown, but it was still a hell of a play to make the catch on that. And looking at those numbers, I think that the general community has been like, wow, you know, Keon's arrived. You know, 8 for 112, 11 targets, by the way. That's a big number. We're going to talk about that in a minute here too. Let's keep this a little bit in perspective here. All right, number one, Josh Allen, 33 completions on 46 attempts. He has not thrown or completed that many passes in 3 seasons. You got to go all the way back to the Heat game loss in Miami, where Allen threw, I think it was 42 for 66 or something ridiculous. But since then, 30 completion games are rare. 40 plus attempts games are rare. Again, we talked about it just a minute ago. The run game has been good enough that the Bills don't need to rely on Josh Allen that much. So I think the total numbers, the volume for Keon Coleman probably decreases as we go forward. You know, we're not going to get many games where you have the opportunity for him to have have 11 targets just because either A, the Bills are ahead, or B, they just don't need to have that many plays. I mean, they're generally a less plays type team in terms of plays per game. I was talking to Connor McGovern yesterday, and we were both, kind of laughing about the Bills had 80 plus snaps on offense. He's like, I'm sore. He said that was the second most he'd ever had with the Bills. So that type of game, not only were the Bills have to throw, but the weird thing about that game was the Ravens' second half, their longest drive was 4 plays. They either went 3 and out or 3 and in for the most part in the second half. So even though not only were the Bills trying to catch up, but they had a million opportunities to do it because the Ravens kept on scoring touchdowns. So I think the idea that game is going to be available to Keon Coleman and this Bills offense is probably incorrect the rest of the season. They will probably not play that type of volume game the rest of the year. Again, maybe if the defense is that bad all year, which is not totally off the table, I'd be stunned, but I guess it could happen. Maybe there are more games like that coming. The thing that's more important and more encouraging if you're a Keon Coleman fan is the targets and the target share. The fact that Coleman had 11 targets of 46. And that doesn't even include, I don't believe, the 2-point conversion target or the pass interference that he drew early in the fourth quarter. Because the 2-point stats don't go into your official stats page, and obviously the pass interference wasn't a throw that actually happened because there's a penalty. So, Coleman was getting more than his fair share of targets. And that's the thing, on an offense where everybody's going to eat and where they, really take pride and thump their chest about moving the ball around and just throwing to the open guy, having anyone with that kind of target share. I mean, you're talking about what would that be? About 20, 25%, a little less than that target share, 23%. It's a pretty solid number on this offense, especially. So that's encouraging by itself. Look, targets is an earned stat. If you get the ball thrown your way, it's probably because you're open or you're the most open or you're the first read. Either way, that's a good thing for the receiver. That's saying the receiver either did his job or was expected to do his job, or the play was prioritized for him. So right off the bat, I don't even have to see how many times he caught the ball. 11 targets is already an improvement from last year. He didn't have any of those games last year. Keon Coleman had one double-digit target game last season, and it was Mike White at the end of the year with the Patriots. So right off the bat, that is an encouraging number for Keon Coleman. Now, when you watch the film, you dive into the question of, was Keon Coleman getting open or was it circumstances? And to be honest, I think it leaned a little more towards the latter. For example, there was an interesting exchange on X a couple days ago. Fantasy Points Data, which to be completely honest is a site that I don't very much trust. They do a lot of separation scores and there's a lot of football stats out there that really aren't quantifiable, but people are trying to quantify. And they're one of the sites that do that a lot. Either way, they posted their numbers on essentially how well Keon Coleman did, regardless of who's throwing him the ball and total passes allowed and what the game situation was. They thought that his separation score was 88th out of 105 receivers in the NFL. So very not good. In addition, Fantasy Points Data said that Keon Coleman had a 0% win rate. Now, keep in mind, this is a guy that was out there for 94% of the Josh Allen throws in this game, or 94% of the Josh Allen routes. So the Bills had about 52 or 53 dropbacks I counted. Keon Coleman was out there for 94% of them. So he probably sat, you do the math, he probably sat down for 3 pass plays in the entire game, which is also a ridiculous number and also a good number and a big improvement from last year. And in 94% of running 50-plus dropbacks for the Bills, Fantasy Points Data said that Keon Coleman won exactly 0 of them. You wonder why I don't trust this site. But Ian Hartitz, who's a fantasy football content creator, I don't know exactly who he works for, but I do follow him, and it's a name that you probably would recognize if you're into fantasy football at all. He responded to that post on X with a few of Keon Coleman's catches and said, how the heck can this guy have a 0% win rate? An excellent question. To Fantasy Points Data's credit, someone who works for them responded with, well, let me tell you about these 3 plays. One of them was the catch at the very end of the game that set up the Bills, got the Bills close for the game-winning field goal. As Fantasy Points data correctly pointed out, the Ravens were in a cover zero look. They brought a massive blitz and dropped everyone back. Generally in that defense, separate of the situation, the job of the defensive back is to make sure, above all else, you don't get beat over your head for a touchdown, because you're the only guy out there who can stop this receiver. If you give up something in front of you, that's fine. We tried a blitz and it didn't work, but at least you didn't give up a touchdown. Now, you can separately make an argument that a touchdown probably would have been a better play for the Ravens right there. Neither here nor there. When it comes to whether or not Keon Coleman won that route, well, the route was really given to him by the defense that the Ravens elected to play. In the other two instances, Fantasy Points data essentially said the same thing. Now my read of it was the Ravens were playing what looked like a cover 3 defense. So you had an outside defensive back who was nominally closest to Keon Coleman, but his job is to make sure nothing gets past him deep. And you had a short defensive back who you would think is more responsible for the flat, but the way the Ravens were playing it, they were kind of leaving that outside short to intermediate-ish area open. In other words, as Fantasy Points data pointed out, and I agree watching the film, I'm not the biggest expert in the world, but I do watch it enough to have an informed opinion to a degree. I think they were right. I think in all three cases, all three times of the plays that Ian Hartitz pointed out as the WTF, how can you have this stat evidence, I thought the Fantasy Points data explanation was legit. And it goes way beyond that. You go through each and every of Keon Coleman's 8 receptions. The majority of them are plays where the Ravens were playing a defense that allowed the route that Coleman was running to be open. Coleman's not really working to get open. He's just the guy who happens to be running the route that the Ravens elected to leave open. I don't even think it's player driven. I don't think they're saying, we think Keon can be open. They're just saying that, okay, if you're going to put 2 receivers here and 2 there, and you're going to do this guy we're going to leave open because we want to cover the other stuff. And in most cases, that's what it was. Now, the Keon Coleman leaping catch on the sideline early in the fourth quarter, that's a Keon play. That's a play where Keon Coleman found what little space there was. Josh Allen made a ridiculous throw. Keon Coleman went up and got a ball and came back down in bounds. That's the type of play you want to see from him all the time. If he had made 8 of those, this entire conversation is totally different. But he only made 1 of those. And the rest of the throws were mostly, there's a 1 scramble drill play in there. Obviously, you had the deflected touchdown, which is a great catch. And Keon Coleman was open because his cornerback blew a tire on the play and fell on the ground. But for the most part, the Keon Coleman that I saw on film in that game was similar to the guy I saw most of last year. Doesn't mean it's not better. Just the fact, like I said, you got 11 targets makes it an improvement. But now the question is Keon Coleman going to be that guy going forward? Deion Dawkins was at the microphone today and was basically doing a victory lap. He's like, you guys asked me questions. I told you I was going to see a breakout coming, which is what Deion said a couple weeks ago. He thought Keon was going to have a big year. And he's like, I'm just telling you the truth. And to Deion's credit, he also said, I like to speak life to it, which is why people love Deion Dawkins. He's making the point that, and did today, that I'm going to talk about this because I want it to happen. And I believe in the fact, Deion said this, I'm going to paraphrase, that if I'm talking about it, I can make someone else believe because I keep talking about how much I believe in it. This is why you love having Deion Dawkins on the team. That being said, of course, Keon Coleman's teammate is going to say that. Does this continue going forward is the big question. I think my conclusion from this game is that a lot of what happened in this game is kind of a one-off. Not only the situation where the Bills had to throw a lot, but just the situational route tree that Keon Coleman was running that got him open. It's not because he's running some great routes and getting open. It's not even what appears to be a situation where the Bills are isolating him to get open. It looked more like, in general, the Ravens were electing to focus coverage in one way or another, and Keon Coleman happened to be the guy who was open more often than not. How do we know if I'm right or not? We will keep watching the season. If Keon Coleman keeps getting 20, 30% of targets, if he keeps getting 5, 6, 7 catches, if he's up in 80, 90, 100 yards more often than not, then you'll know that there's been a bigger improvement and that there's more likely a breakout type season coming for Keon Coleman. But through one game, I can't get to a point where I'm going to tell you that Keon's 8 for 113 or 112 and a touchdown is something you can expect every week. Because a number of these things outside of the deflected touchdown, which, yes, was certainly a good degree of lucky, a number of these things I don't feel like are things that you can sit there and intentionally repeat. Now, that doesn't mean that the Bills won't target him more going forward, that they won't look at that production and say, hey, here's a guy that when he's given an opportunity has now proven that he can take advantage of it. Let's make use of that more often. That's, some money over there that we can cash in. That's a way to move the ball. Let's go find zero more often because it seems like he's improved. But I want to see more before I get to that point with Keon Coleman. All right, I'm going to take one more break. When we come back, you want to talk about a play where, or a thing that the Bills have depended on offensively. That quarterback sneak has been a huge, huge winner for the Bills over the last couple of years. Not so in this Ravens game or against the Chiefs. We'll talk about where the Bills go from here on that play when we come back. You're watching the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown, and this is Rock One. Want to remind you guys once again that every night, Monday through Thursday, right here on Rochester First, we've got BKL Nightly. It is our daily wrap-up of everything going on Bills-wise. We'll tell you more about Ed Oliver today. We'll have some of the Deion Dawkins comments. Keon Coleman spoke to the media today. So all that and more. Myself, Caleb Carr, Rachel Liebert will be with you on Rock First tonight at 8:30 p.m. All right, now the Bills have had a weapon that's been, almost untouchable on offense. And yes, it's Josh Allen related, but it's not specifically Josh Allen. Okay, maybe it's mostly Josh Allen. But the quarterback sneak is something that has been talked about as an unstoppable play when it comes to the Bills and their offense for the last two seasons. And, Josh Allen's a big part of that. But the offensive line, I think, certainly deserves some of the credit. Either way, the Bills failed on that sneak twice against the Ravens. And they failed on a quarterback sneak 3 times against the Chiefs last year in the AFC Championship. That's more quarterback sneak fails in the last 2 games than I'm pretty sure they had all of last year. Now, look, it was never a perfect play. It's not even perfect for the Eagles. The Eagles get stopped on it sometimes as well. But 5 times in 2 games, I think, is enough to be concerning, to make you wonder if this is a play that the Bills can still go to on a regular basis. So yesterday I talked to Connor McGovern and David Edwards, we're going to see in reverse order here, about where they are in terms of their confidence with the sneak and maybe how the Bills approach it differently here going forward.
It's still a great play for us. And so as we gain inventory on how guys are stopping us or what their plan is for that specific play, then we have a little bit more inventory on our plan. So I'm not worried about it. I know that we've got a great plan.
We're just trying new things. Like, we've always gone to the left. Now we're going to the right, just switching, just keeping teams guessing. We're doing it a little bit differently. We're not running as much as like a duo. We're doing more that like actually QB sneak. Then we go back the old way. Just we have more repertoire now. Like, teams aren't only stacking. Like, first time we went to run it last week, they all slanted to the left, and we got an easy 3-4 yards off it. So it's like now teams got to wait a little bit more, like which way we're actually going to run it. So I think that really helps us.
And that is, I think, one of the things that are going to change for the Bills with this play going forward is that you do have to vary it. By the way, that first sneak that Connor McGovern referenced there, where the whole defense slanted left. So in other words, the defense lines up over the ball as if they want to kind of gum up the A gap. And then because the Bills had always run it left last year, literally every time, the entire defensive line all moved to the defense's right to the offense's left. And one of the things that's funny about that is me and David Edwards have a continuing conversation about how he is the poor guy who very often ends up on the bottom of the pile when it comes to the Bills running the quarterback sneak. And even though that sneak was run up the middle and a little bit to right, David Edwards still was the guy who ended up on the bottom of all the bodies because all the defensive bodies went left and the entire flow of the play couldn't help but end up a little bit left. Either way, I like the fact that the Bills are understanding that you can't just go left all the time, that this is the play that you have to vary up. And separate of just kind of self-scouting and understanding who you are and trying to change who you are, I think the fact that this play has now been one that teams have kind of had some success with the last 2 years. Granted, two really good defenses, but regardless, I don't think the Bills can just run this play all the time, anytime they wanted to, like you saw the last 2 seasons. And I do think the Bills have to make it a little harder to discern what they're doing. I mean, for the last 2 years, it's felt like 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. Josh Allen could have walked up to the line of scrimmage, held up a sign that said, "I'm about to sneak," put the sign down, called signals, and got the first down anyway. Those days at least appear to be over. Doesn't mean this play is not going to work or can't be effective. It's still Josh Allen. I mean, he's like a moose when he's carrying the ball. He's going to be able to get 1 yard more often than not. But is he going to be able to do it 90% of the time? Is he going to be able to make it obvious and still do it? I think there's a question there. And already, you hear Connor McGovern talking about how we want to do more, we want to do it differently. We want to vary it. When he talks about running it in duo, that's more of a traditional run play. Even though it's a quarterback sneak and a 1 yard play, there are some blocking rules that the Bills' offensive line is using to make that play work sometimes. So being able to, or feeling the need to vary it up, I like that as a positive, because I felt the Bills have had to do this for a long time. I've got 1,000 ideas about how to do fun things off a sneak. I mean, fake a sneak and pitch it out to James Cook, fake a sneak and throw a quick, pass over the top. I mean, all these things you would think would be theoretically available to the Bills with that play, as much as they've ran it. So at the very least, not going left all the time is an improvement. But again, I don't think the Bills can just assume this is a winning play now, constantly. I mean, like I said, they've gotten it stopped 5 times in the last 2 games. They went 2 for 4 on it against the Ravens. I think between the 20s, it still works. Josh Allen talked yesterday about it, and he said, look, I understand that when we get close to the goal line, teams are going to put in, bigger bodies, goal line style defenses. It's going to be harder to succeed with. And against the Ravens, both of the stops in this game were plays on the goal line. One of them was even a quarterback sneak for more like the 2. That's a hard play, even for Josh Allen. Between the 20s, if you get 2nd and 9 at like the 40 and you throw it to the 49, now it's 3rd and 1 from there, I think you've got a good chance to just come up, run the sneak, and get the first down. A, because you don't have the big goal line bodies in there, but B, because the defense will likely feel like, all right, if we give this up, we still got 50 yards of field we can defend. We're not right on the goal line giving up, the touchdown right here on this play. So I think the Bills will have a much better opportunity and a much easier opportunity to use it between the 20s. Inside the goal line might be a question. You might have to really think now, if you're Sean McDermott and Joe Brady, do we have to run a legit play here? And maybe does the legit play become more attractive simply because you're good at those plays? I mean, James Cook, 16 touchdowns last year. Your offensive line is one of the 2 or 3 best in the NFL. I mean, there's an argument to be made to not run the sneak just so you don't beat up your quarterback as much. But I do think going forward here that this is a play the Bills just can't do anytime they want. It'll still be a good play. I mean, you heard Dave Edwards say we still feel good about it, and he's right, and the Bills should. But I think we've seen the end of every single and one play being a quarterback sneak, especially around the goal line, and especially, again, because they have options there. Even Keon Coleman is a guy, I don't think a lot of us liked the fade in the end zone, but you would think if Coleman matures and gets better, that's a play that should be more effective as well. Not more effective than the sneak, but I certainly want to drop it in there once in a while to keep teams honest at least. And like I said, I am dying for Joe Brady. I don't know how many people go back to 2003, 2004, but there was a game the Bills played in Seattle where Drew Bledsoe, very not noted running quarterback, faked a sneak. It was 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 on the Seattle 35 or so. He dove in the pile, or at least leaned in the pile, at least like he was going to sneak, and then backed out and flung a swing pass out to Willis McGahee. He went 35 yards for a touchdown. That play has got to be out there somewhere for Buffalo. It can't be that hard to script, especially with the weapons you have. I mean, you saw James Cook in space on that 150-yard catch. Let everybody gum in the middle and where 17 is going to be, or where they think he's going to be, and let him flick it somewhere else. That feels to me like a touchdown waiting to happen. So we'll see if the Bills go that way going forward. Speaking of touchdowns waiting to happen, my best segue of the day. The Jets have a problem that the Bills need to exploit, and his name is Brandon Stevens, corner number 2 for the Jets. He's the non-Sauce Gardner corner, brought over from the Ravens this year in the offseason, and boy, was he bad against the Steelers. Allowed 2 touchdowns, 5 catches on 7 targets, 60 yards, and looked bad doing it. I mean, you can be a corner and give up 2 touchdowns, but, be in a guy's face or have close coverage and just, have a great quarterback, make a great throw and throw your hands up and say, what am I supposed to do? That's not what this was. I mean, this was Stevens being close and allowing catches. This was Stevens looking like he was ridiculously out of position. And at the end of the game, I don't think Aaron Rodgers specifically addressed this, but when the Steelers had a couple of we have to have it throws, it felt like Aaron Rodgers was dropping back and saying, where's 21, and just throwing the ball that way. The second to last play for the Steelers on offense, the last play for the Steelers on offense, was a throw at Brandon Stevens on 3rd and 12 or 11 to where I thought he had committed pass interference and the Jets just didn't, the Jets were able to avoid a call. For this week, this is the guy that Josh Allen needs to be looking at. Again, in part because, don't throw to Sauce Gardner. He's not the guy you want to look at ever. Throw at Brandon Stevens. And when you have the everybody eats offense, that it doesn't, you're just looking for the open guy. The guy on 21 should be open most of this game. He looked really bad. And in Baltimore, he was a guy, his reputation with the Ravens was someone who can stay with his receiver well, like would be in good position, but then wouldn't get his head turned around to find the ball. And as Josh Allen proves on a regular basis, along with many of these other really good quarterbacks, if you're a defensive back, even if you're in good position, if you have your back to the ball, quarterbacks are just going to throw it past your ear hole all day. Because if you can't see the ball coming and the receiver can, he's more likely to adjust, and you're more likely to get a pass interference penalty, which is something else that happened to Brandon Stevens in the opener against the Steelers. And it was also a problem that continued. There was a play to, who is the Steelers' number 2 receiver they like a lot? Oh, I had the name. I'll try and find it here while I'm talking. Austin, Calvin Austin. Not a huge guy. There was a play down the sideline where Stevens was in good position, and Aaron Rodgers essentially just threw it right over his head for 20, 25 yards. This is something the Bills need to exploit and should be able to exploit too. I mean, I don't care what you think of the receivers. I think Keon and Josh Palmer and Khalil Shakir all looked plenty fine in week 1. There should be someone that you can throw to on 21 for the Jets and have some success. So when you're watching this game on Sunday, as a Bills fan or even as a football fan, look for 21 and see how many times the Bills like to throw the ball his way. I think it'll be a high number. I really do. All right, that's going to be it for today. We'll be back on Monday talking about this game, probably more on Ed Oliver. I mean, I can't imagine that injury is going to be nothing. Maybe. But I'm sure we'll have a whole lot more on that as well. Remember, once again, 8:30 tonight, Monday through Thursday, every single week, BKL Nightly, wrapping up everything that goes on at One Bills Drive. We'll also have a recap show of the game on Sunday night, probably about 9 o'clock. Thanks for watching the Endgame today. We'll catch you on Monday as well. I'm Thad Brown, and this is Rock One.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.